So I think this guy might be the worst type of grifter. I think he's worse than a drinker. I think he's worse than neurotic, and those guys are just idiots in their own right. But this dude right here really grinds my gears, and I think it's because he's probably the most openly racist of them all, but also the guy who genuinely tries to play tough because he's behind the camera and behind the microphone. He likes to talk a lot of shit and get loud and get heavy like he's some guy who's built like that. But the sad part about it is that guys like him tend to not be like this, whatever they think they are in person. And the other thing I hate about this guy is the fact that he's a literal United States Navy officer. And I have a weird, very unfortunate problem with that because it's like, bro, you're a United States Navy officer. Don't you have like some kind of discipline that they teach you or some kind of thing? And it makes me sad because, like, honestly, a lot of soldiers. I mean, being a soldier is rough, and it does require discipline. So we know he has it, and it does require you to have some form of integrity if you're fighting for the country. Now, obviously, we know a lot of soldiers can be dicks. He's clearly one of them, and we know that that's the same case with some police officers. Just people in that kind of enforcement or kind of force anyway can be that type of person, and it's unfortunate because they take some kind of oath, they vow to protect the country, but I feel like this dude is just too racist to protect other races of people. And it's sad in another way because it's like, as a soldier, you're supposed to protect the people of America, but he would only view Americans as white people. And if he had to protect anyone who wasn't white, it'd probably be some kind of DEI forced protection, just the way he speaks and runs his mouth. The other thing is just the fact that like he just tends to love to harp on black people. He loves to say the word black with the most disrespectful disdain for the word, and then he tries to make it seem like he's justified in his statements, and it's just because he's some tough guy on the microphone. And I can't stand people like this because it's almost like you're doing it, you're an asshole, yeah, but you're also just kind of like, yeah, but what are you going to do about it? Granted, I'm not even going to come challenge you to a fight. I don't know where you live. I don't want to know where you live. Honestly, if I ever saw you in person, I'd probably throw up. The unfortunate reality is guys like him get paid more than guys like me because guys like me tell the truth. Guys like him grift for money. He's a grifter. He's toxic. He's racist. That gets you way more love in America in 2026 than it ever did in 2005. You know what I mean? And funny enough, I'm pretty sure Ryan Kinel was probably about in his 40s, maybe his 50s. Um, and you can just kind of go off of that. You can just go off of the fact that, like, it does pay money to grift and be arrogant and disrespectful and rude, which is why the way he goes about it, you can tell he has a audience that he likes to make happy, and a lot of his audience are January are probably January 6er supporters. A lot of people who are just very much anti-black, anti-woman, anti any other race of people, except for a Asian girl who might be into him or a big booty Latina who might be into him. That's why they liked Snarky J. But I think Snarky J kind of was just like, I think you guys might be a little too racist because Snarky J clearly isn't. So it's like she kind of separated herself from these idiots because, yes, that's pretty much the issue. One other issue I have is the fact that this guy does not care about the things he makes content about. You know what I mean? Like, I could at least believe that the critical drinker likes Star Wars. You know what I mean? The way he talks about Star Wars, the way Ryan Kinel talks about superheroes, you can tell he doesn't give a damn about superheroes. You can tell he's never read a comic, especially Lanterns. You can tell recently the Lanterns content. I'll get into somebody else with that Lanterns content soon, but you can tell he doesn't watch. You can tell he like either didn't watch the episode, which is very prominent, or he didn't read a Green Lantern comic a day in his life. You can tell. It's like when he's talking about it. I wish I had the video, but I really don't want to waste anyone's ear power or patience with his content because he just sucks. You can go find the video. Um, if you care to hear sandpaper on the chalkboard, you know what I mean? If you want to hear sandpaper on your eardrums, you can hear him talk. His voice is horrible. The disrespect he just has towards content is just not there. It just doesn't make any sense that like his respect is just awful. And he just goes into this rant about how the show disrespects Hal Jordan, and that's clearly not the case. Hal's a very respected figure. Yes, John butts heads with him, but John is a Marine, just like Hal's an Air Force pilot. They butt heads because John is a lot more by the books Marine Corps style. Hal goes off of the whim, and he has his own go with the flow style. They're not the same person, but that makes for a great relationship. And also, that's part of the best part of the relationship in the comics. Usually, Hal's not like 30 years older than John, but in this case, it kind of works. Now, as far as the whole thing goes, he hasn't really said anything about John's complexion yet, but you know John's complexion bothers him just because he has issues with black characters all the time, especially black women. That's just who he is. It seems like black people. I feel like a black guy might have stole his girl in high school and he never let it go, or maybe the white girls he wanted a black guy and that pissed him off. You know what I mean? White guys have their ways of going about these things, especially guys like Ryan Kinel specifically. And one of the things is like he was just going in. He's like kept saying like Hal Jordan is the best Green Lantern ever, which he is. Hal Jordan is the greatest Green Lantern ever. Is he my favorite? No, my favorite is John. John was my first big experience with Green Lantern because of Justice League back in 2001 and Static Shock. And Hal was like a big deal for me afterwards, but that was because I was kind of learning Green Lantern stuff as I was going. The Jeff John runs was going on in the 2000s, legendary comic run, by the way. Brightest Day, Blackest Night, stuff like that was going on. The Green Lantern animated series in 2011, phenomenal series. The movie was awful, but the movie is what kind of hurt the Green Lantern reputation, even though all that great stuff was going on. First Flight, Emerald Knights, you know what I'm saying? At First Flight, if you really wanted like a nice introduction to Hal Jordan, First Flight would be your best introduction because it gives you kind of like it just starts off with him at the origin point where he meets Ivan Sword and gets the ring, goes into total thing, meets Sinestro. Sinestro's a dick. He fights Sinestro at the end. It's awesome. First Flight is pretty much the best like animated version of Hal's backstory you'll ever get. And I can say this because I actually read comics and I know what I'm talking about, and I watch animated things, which Ryan kind of clearly doesn't. But it's easy to piss off people on the internet when you don't know what you're talking about. And there is a lot of respect for Hal in the show. In fact, Hal is given free food for being Hal Jordan. John even says in the episode, I respect him. I respect Hal Jordan. The sheriff lady never disrespects him, but she does have to do her job because she is the sheriff of a town. She has a job to do, and it's not. It's just how is Green Lantern? He should have jurisdiction, like the Dora Milaje. Funny enough, he doesn't. But he does still do what he has to do. We know Hal's good at his job. We know Hal is competent. We know he's smart. We know his detective skills are actually good because he figures out pretty soon that what's going on isn't what they're trying to make it seem to be. It's exactly what it is. He even figures out that the detector at the game was an alien detector, not a gun detector or a metal detector. So he is very good at his job. Hal is actually extremely good at his job. And if we're going to talk about the second episode where he leaves his lantern back at home, Hal has a tendency to do stuff like that. That was Abin Sur's problem. That's why he ended up getting killed because he didn't charge his ring like he should have, and it ultimately was his demise. That's why Hal has his ring now. So Hal has those same tendencies, but also it was a nice way to kind of separate them so we could get a little bit more on John by himself, a little bit more on Hal on it by himself. John, we saw a pocket dimension. John grabs his lantern, gives it to him. He charges it. He knows the oath, but Hal's clearly done with this for some reason. We don't know why yet. And, it just goes into this whole cool, put on the suit, fly to the science cell prisons to talk to Sinestro. Everyone keeps saying he flies to this other planet. I thought you guys knew what you were talking about. The science cell planet. And Ulrich Thompson he's going to be a great Sinestro. I can't wait to see more of this. But the grifting is out of line. The grifting is out of line. And I got to get into this because he dropped a video talking about David Lindelof. And I don't know what your disdain for David Lindelof is because you don't know the guy. If you think he's a terrible writer, fine. But Watchmen has like a 95 on Rotten Tomatoes by the critics and like a 56 by the audience, which is a huge disdain, I'll be honest. But a lot of those people are big Watchmen fans because, it's kind of hard to follow Watchmen based on if you actually read the comic or saw the movie, you would know it's kind of hard to follow that story because the way the story ends is kind of wild. I don't want to spoil it for anybody who didn't, but Watchmen's an incredible comic. Incredible comic. I personally like the movie, but I understand why fans of the comic don't like the movie, if that makes sense. Um, I think Jackie Earle Haley is the perfect Rorschach. I don't think we'll ever get that again. So, I personally say go watch the movie. I'm not a big Zack Snyder person, but Watchmen is my favorite movie by him. If it's not that, then it's a Snyder cut. But other than that, it's those two. It's not even close after that. Like, I don't like any of his movies really. So let that be known with that. Um, but what was he saying about David Lindelof? It's like he shouldn't be a writer. I was like, didn't David Lindelof write Lost, which was like one of the biggest shows of its time that kind of had a pop cultural influence even? Like, Lost was a huge deal when it first hit the screens back in 2004, 2006, I believe, 2004. Yep. And he did an incredible job on that show until it was supposed to end. That's when the show got goofy, and I was just like, what in the blue hell are you doing with this situation? But let's see. He wrote that Watchmen show. He wrote The Leftovers, which I hear is really good. He wrote one episode of Phineas and Ferb, but he wrote the screenplay for World War Z. He wrote Star Trek Into Darkness. He wrote Lost. Yeah, he wrote some really solid stuff. He's got some solid stuff under his belt. And then Chris Mundy is the other writer for the show, who they won't talk shit about because he wrote True Detective and Ozark, two of some of the highest acclaimed shows of the last decade. So you really can't say that there's no good writing here on this show. And the thing about but like I said, they don't talk about Chris Money. They talk about David Lindelof. He was calling him a pussy, and how bad his voice sounds, even though you're in the same ballpark. In fact, your voice is worse. Like I said, sandpaper rubbing against my eardrums is what you sound like, Ryan. You sound like a douchebag, a horrendous douchebag. But David Lindelof, and then he called him a cuck. He called him a cuck. I'm like, how do you know he's a cuck? Did you meet the guy that banged his wife and made him watch? You know this guy personally? Like, this guy was like, "Yo, Ryan, I banged David Lindelof's wife, and I made him watch me do it," and he just sat there and cried. Like, do you have proof of this that he's a cuck, or are you just being a douche? Which, yeah, you're being a douche because you don't know him personally. And it's sad that all of you guys' content sound the same. Y'all like if Critical Drinker drops a video about someone he hates, you're right behind them. Then Bone Bridge is right behind them. Then Ryan, then Neurotics there, and now Jester Bell is like the girl version of y'all. And you got this one Asian girl who I don't know her name, but as soon as she goes against the green, y'all gonna cast her out. You know what I mean? It's like y'all are so goofy. Y'all are so goofy. And then y'all focusing on the guy, John, sleeping with the woman who I honestly think might be there's two theories here. She could either be Katma Tui in disguise, which would make sense because John and Katma have a relationship in the comics, and she trains him, but she not just trained him here because Hal's training him. Twist, yes. Or she's Sinestro's daughter in disguise, which I cannot remember his daughter's name ever. And that's why Sinestro knows about John Stewart at the end of episode 2. We don't know. But it's called a mystery series for a reason. And I think David Lindelof and Chris Money are doing a great job writing a slow burn detective for an 8 episode series. It's 8 episodes long. And I think we're going to get probably one of the two best scenes in the DCU so far with John and Hal separately and one of them together. And that's when we're going to be sitting here saying Lanterns is the truth. And I know it's going to end that way. I have my confidence that it will. But again, unfortunately, this guy is just too egregious with it. He's just so awful. It's like you don't know David Lindelof personally. You don't really know a lot of black people personally, clearly, and you don't really read comics. Yet you have all these terrible opinions about everything, and then your argument about the source material. Let's see, Mogo Doesn't Socialize is a very obscure comic from the '80s. The pocket dimension is a real thing. Hal having his suit in the closet is a very silver age thing. You do know, like back in the day, like I say, the 50s and six. When did Hal's Jordan come out? 1959, I believe. Hal's 1959, and throughout the 60s and the 70s, Hal's suit didn't just burst onto him. He had to pull it out the closet and put it on. That's a very silver age thing. That's like a deep cut from the Silver Age. But it's also cool because it saves on the budget. Like it saves on the budget just having the suit there instead of having to CGI it onto him. He just puts the suit on and rocks out with it, and it looks a lot like his Earth One costume. Like people are complaining about the suit, but it looks a lot like his Earth One look. And that was the picture we got from James Gunn when he announced Kyle Chandler. We got Earth One Hal's picture, so maybe that was the point. So it can look a little more realistic, a little more like a suit instead of like a tight ass latex, whatever they were going with. It looks good. I think it looks really good. And of course, there's all this talk about John and the wife, and like I said, like it's like I gave y'all what I thought about that. They even addressed the situation, and he says, "I would have never slept with you if I'd known you were married." Moral. That's a moral character trait for the character. You know, being a Marine, he has a moral, something you should have, Ryan Kinel, but you don't. As a United States Navy officer looking at an Air Force pilot and a Marine, you should have way more respect for those two because they move a certain way. Yes, Hal's a lot more out there than John, but John's very much what he is. He's always been that character. John has always been the straight man. You put him, I said this in my reviews of the show. I've been fighting for Lantern since it started. John has always been the straight man. You put him with Wally in Justice League, he's a straight man. You put him with Hal, he's a straight man. Put him with Guy, he's a straight man. Put him with Kyle, he's a straight man. You put him with anyone, Hal, John is a straight man. And Hal's always been the charismatic, out there personality type. And there's nothing wrong with either dynamic. Both dynamics are great. And they're both great casted people. They're two of some of the best casted people in the DCU right now. Like I said, Brosnahan is wonderful, and so is Corinne Sweat, and so is Alcock. All the castings are good, honestly. I don't have an issue with any of them. But you guys, just anytime you see a black person, you gotta just spit on the content. Excuse me. And it's sad because you could easily not be a douche, but like I said, you choose douchebag pretty much every chance you get, which is precisely why I think there's a lot of this that needs to be discussed. I think YouTube might really need to consider some of the things that they tend to allow to fly on YouTube, especially the stuff these guys say out their mouth, which is blatantly racist, very blatantly sexist, very blatantly misogynist, very blatantly against anyone who isn't white. It gives off white supremacy almost in a way. They just don't say the words out loud. And that's just kind of where my grift comes my grift comes from with you right now, because it's like you're really just very arrogant about a lot of things. You don't know anything. You put on this content like you know, but you don't really know anything. And it makes it hard for like actual movie reviewers because it's like you guys are not reviewing anything. You're just politically charging the people who politically align with you, and you're also charging a lot of race bait and hate against the other groups of people. For what purpose? Oh yeah, you get paid to keep your lights on. And it's just what it is. But again, I gotta go. I actually have something important to do. I actually, touch grass and have a life that I like to live sometimes. Unlike you, who's sitting around keyboard warrioring and microphone warrioring and giving all this egregious energy out into the world, not really contributing to anything. But anyway, guys, let me know how you guys feel down below. Please let me know your opinions about this concept and this topic. I will see you guys on the next one.